The Prime Minister continued his virtual meetings with opposition leaders today ahead of next week's budget. He spoke with Green Party leader Annamie Paul and NDP leader Jagmeet Singh this afternoon. Prime Minister needs support of at least one of the major opposition parties to survive the budget confidence vote in the House of Commons. If not, we'll be into a snap federal election. Jagmeet Singh has already said he won't let the Liberal government fall during the pandemic, says Canada doesn't need an election now. Has his thinking changed at all after his discussion with the Prime Minister this afternoon? Let's find out. Jagmeet Singh's with me. Mr. Singh, good to see you again. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
How did the meeting go?
Meeting went well. I raised the concerns that I said I would raise. One of the major concerns I raised is that we fought hard for paid sick leave, but the delivery by the Liberal government has left a lot lacking, and that's making sure it's more flexible, easier to obtain, quicker to obtain, and make sure that the amount covers someone's salary. So that's what we fought for. I said that it's got to be improved. It's an important tool to getting people to stay home when they're sick so they don't have to go in to work and make the impossible choice. And the second is we want to see more proactive role of the federal government, all hands on deck to get everyone vaccinated. Those are the two big things I raised and I think are very important that we move on.
And he said, I hear you on that, Mr. Singh, I'll absolutely do what you're asking me to do, right? That was his response?
Well, he said he would take my concerns back to the team, and I said very persistently that these are things that we need to do. These are things that are important for people. A lot of people are getting sick in workplaces, and a lot of people can't choose to stay home because if they stay home, they're not getting paid. And not getting paid and missing days of work means at the end of the month when they've got to make their bills, there's just not enough money. So for a lot of people, the fact that they're still going to work is a serious problem and can't be fixed unless we can cover that pay. And that's why it's so vital. And we got to find a way to get more people vaccinated more quickly. There's just, we're seeing that the hardest hit communities are where there's the lowest rate of vaccination. That can't continue.
What if those, I'm not sure, demands or suggestions, because you've already said you won't topple the government, you won't allow the Prime Minister to have an election you say he wants. So what if those things you've said are absolute requirements for Canadians? What if they're not in the budget?
It would just be another example of this government really failing people. And it's particularly when we know that there is a program that we fought for that just needs to be improved and needs to be made better, and more people will use it. We know that the uptake is in the $400 million range, and the budget was approved for over $2 billion. So it's clear that the uptake is not where it should be. And really what that translates to is that people are going into work sick. We know that right now workplace transmission is the highest risk. Workers are getting sick and they're bringing the illness back and making their families sick. And they can't make that impossible choice. They can't just say, I'm going to stay home if that means they're not going to get paid. So that's why this is so important. And the cost of not doing anything would be that more people get sick when they go to work and maybe more people lose their lives. Right. That's something we can avoid.
In a minority parliament, you would in normal times have a certain leverage as an opposition party to say, if you don't put some of these measures in the budget, you can't count on my support. But having said that you won't topple the government, what compels the Prime Minister to adopt any of your ideas?
Well, what should compel the Prime Minister is that a lot of the things that we're fighting for are things that he promised to do in the first place. He promised childcare, he promised pharmacare, and the Liberals have been promising these things for decades, and they've broken those promises. At the end of the day, him failing to do what I'm telling him to do is less important than the failure of following through on what he committed to people. And that should be the motivation, that he promised this to people, he campaigned on it, and he should then follow through on it. So I'm hoping that is the pressure. I also want to make it really clear, the Liberals have also signaled that they want an election. I'm not going to give them an excuse to go to an election. Justin Trudeau wants one. He'll have to go to, I guess it was going to be the Governor General, but in this case, the Chief Supreme Court Justice, and make that request, because I think it's the wrong thing to do.
So to be clear, you're planning to support the budget next week, no matter what's in it and whether you think it does enough for the country.
I'm planning to use my position to be responsible and not put this country into an election. I'm looking at the reality of the third wave, field hospitals being set up in Ontario, ICU units being overrun across Canada, the third wave spreading like wildfire across Canada. And in that context, I will not be in any way responsible for calling an election. I think that would be irresponsible to do. It would be irresponsible and not a good leader to plunge our country into an election with how bad things are right now. From what I've heard from people, what I've heard from healthcare workers, it would be the wrong thing to do. So I will not be doing that.
Let me drill down on something you've raised here. And you've called for more active participation from the federal government to get people vaccinated as we see these cases spike in the third wave of the pandemic. What greater role could the federal government be playing here? They're bringing in the vaccines, they're trying to get them, they're distributing them to the provinces, but what specifically are you saying they should be doing more of?
If you look at what we're going through, this is a massive crisis, one of the biggest crises we've ever faced as a country. And I just don't accept that the federal government is doing everything possible to get people vaccinated. We saw that in the States, the federal government, in that case, the President Biden's administration, took a really hands-on approach, deployed the military, was involved in the vaccination process aggressively. We need to see that happen in Canada. It's just not good enough to sit back and say, well, I'm offered help. I believe the federal government has to play an active role.
So what are you saying? The federal government should order the military into, let's say, the province of Ontario to speed up the vaccination process, when Ontario says the problem isn't the speed of the vaccination process, it's the supply of vaccines?
Well, there's certainly a problem with the supply, and that problem lies squarely at the feet of the Liberal government, no doubt. But when a massive amount of vaccine was available, there wasn't a plan in place to quickly vaccinate everybody. And there's still not a good plan in place to make sure the people who need it most are getting vaccinated. We know that there are hot zones, areas, communities hard hit, and they're not getting vaccinated. We know in Toronto, for example, some of the poorest communities where there's the highest rate of COVID are the lowest rate of vaccination. And some of the wealthiest communities that also have the lowest rate of COVID are where we're seeing the highest rate of vaccination. So it's also where the vaccine is going and where it's getting done, where the vaccination is happening. Okay. I think that in communities that are hard hit, we need to be looking at creative ways. Let's go door to door, go to warehouses and factory work sites that are hard hit and get everyone vaccinated. There's got to be, this is a crisis, and the approach has to be one where we're not limited by saying, okay, I've done a gesture or two. We have to take this seriously and save lives by responding with the seriousness that's proportional to the crisis that we're going through.
All right. Jagmeet Singh, good to have you join me tonight. Thanks for talking to me, and we'll talk next time.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.